I suspect every industry has its omens, its auguries, the tea leaves it reads to try to glean how some things are going. Today, let's go over 3 that I've used in my career and talk about each of them and if it's got validity. So for each one, I'm going to give it a score on how real it is, if it is predictive or if it's a lagging indicator, and whether or not it's causal, meaning whether or not you can force something to happen by triggering this event to occur. So the first one I noticed on Dragon Age Inquisition. Early on in Dragon Age Inquisition, and for quite a long time in its development, when you talk to people who were not on the project, you got a lot of really strange questions, the answer to which was almost always no. Questions like, can I chop down a tree? Can I dig a hole? Questions that come from a place of not understanding what the project's about. And then I noticed that I was still getting very odd questions, but now the answer to these questions was almost always yes. Questions like, will my party follow me around? Will I be able to have romances? Do I get different equipment that I can upgrade? Can I craft? And it made me realize that there's a pivot point where people understand your project well enough that the questions they're asking are more relevant to the reality of the game. That means they shift from being so far afield that they're all answered with no to being close to your game, so they're mostly answered yes. So what does this indicate? Well, this moment is an indication that you're done with your vision and possibly even your pre-production, because you've been able to articulate and demonstrate the game well enough so that people who are not on your project are able to ask questions that are actually relevant to the game itself. So let's evaluate this. Is this a real indicator? I do think it is. I think that when this shift occurs, it is an indication that you have a good understanding of the project. Now, for something like a sequel or a project in a well-understood franchise series like a sports game, you might be here at the very first day of the project. That might say something about the phases of such a game. Is it predictive or lagging? I don't think it's predictive. I think this is an indication that you've already passed your phase. But is it causal? And this one I think is absolutely causal, because if you can force this issue, communicate more strongly, answer the questions, make people understand your game so much better, that's basically what the vision phase is about. So you can cause yourself to go through this phase by causing this moment to occur. In fact, I'm going to underline this one. Not only is this indicator causal, you want to force this one. You don't want to be in this state where the answer to the questions you're getting from people higher up from you in the organization is always no. That doesn't breed confidence. That doesn't get people excited about your project. So the faster you can get from no to yes, the better it is for your project within a larger organization. Now, you have to be careful, because if you focus too much on just the questions that people not on your project are going to ask, you may miss some of the ones that are a little bit more inside baseball that they wouldn't think to ask. The second one is one from my collection of bug horoscopes, let's say. And it's this. You're going along and you have a relatively large number of programming bugs on the project. You're building technology, and this is where testing is occurring. And then one day in triage, and you're doing triage, right? You're noticing that your design bugs are spiking up. And what does this indicate? For me, this has been a strong indication that you're now in your alpha phase. Is this a real indicator? I do think this is a real indicator. I think that it is showing that you are moving from the technology phase of your project into the content phase of your project from a testing perspective. And that means that this is what alpha is about. You are feature complete or close to it, and testing is able to open up wide on the content in the game. Is it predictive or lagging? It's definitely lagging. In fact, if you look at the curve here, you can kind of see where probably the actual moment is when the curve kind of tips up here, but it's pretty hard to see that until you're well past it. So that moment where it crosses programming is probably a little bit easier to actually see. And is this one causal? I do not think this one is causal. I think any effort you made to try to force this one would be weird weird and would twist your project in a bizarre way. Maybe I'm wrong and I'm not seeing it, but I do not think you should attempt to force this one. Okay, last one for today. Total number of bugs on a project. On a well-formed project, what you will see is something like this. Bugs come in relatively slowly, you hit that inflection point and they start coming in incredibly quickly. And then as you get closer and closer to the end of the project, it starts to flatten out. And you have a nice sort of landing strip here where the number of bugs is relatively small day over day, or at least compared to the high points of your filing rate, and the build is able to stabilize. So that is an indicator that it's getting close to ship. Is this one real? I absolutely do believe this one's real. Now that flattening happens for a variety of reasons. One reason is that you are having less and less bugs found on the project because the build is stabilizing. But another almost equally important is that you are becoming more and more restrictive in your triage. And as you say no to more bugs, the testers are learning what is no longer valid to file. Or you may even go so far as to tell the testers that, we're not accepting clipping bugs any longer, so stop filing them. And that's actually almost as good as them finding less bugs naturalistically, because the reason why this is important, this flattening spot, is churn in the build is going down, and that's what it's going to take to ship ultimately. Just some time when the build is not changing as much for you to find the remaining critical crashes and problems in the build. Is this one causal? It is causal, sort of. You can force this stabilization to occur by locking the build down and disallowing qualitative bugs from being filed, by forcing bugs to only be above a certain severity before they're allowed to enter into your database. This will allow you to ship, but by doing that, by being too restrictive, you are going to ship something of lower quality. So it is causal to a degree. Something else is if you see a curve that looks more like this, that's an indication that this is a game that shipped too fast. It started the process of flattening out and then either ran out of time or decided to ship anyway, and it didn't have enough time to stabilize. And those are often games that ship unfinished with relatively obvious polish bugs and potentially even severe stability issues inside of them. So is this one predictive? Yes, this is predictive. You can use the shape of your curve to tell whether or not you're getting close or not. So I hope that you found it interesting to look behind some of the more woohoo astrological parts of the way that game developers look at things. If you found this interesting, give this video a like, share it with someone else. I'll see you again soon. Thank you.